What really lies within the jungles of South America? It's a bit hard to say, actually. Within the last couple of years, there have been tribes spotted out there that clearly have had no contact with the rest of the world. They don't even know Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, I think his name, are getting married. Truly a fate worse than hell, let me tell you that. Anyways, along with all that, actually last week a new species was discovered in a cave system where it became apparent you could see their internal organs functioning, which that too now continues to add to the growing list of things that we think exist or don't exist, but really we could be totally wrong, which brings us around to today's episode. In the depths of the jungle, a massive snake exists that appears to be beholden to one specific area of the river. For one reason or another, the snake will return to this area to reproduce. At the same time, a tribe lives out there that has not been contacted before, and a cable channel wants to ruin their pure bliss by making contact with them. Classic. Heading out there, they encounter this snake that starts just absolutely wrecking face. But the question now becomes, where did it come from, and could this actually be possible? Well, let's discuss that in today's episode covering Anaconda. But prior to starting, be a cool guy and like this video, or be an even cooler guy and subscribe so we can finally hit like 1.2 million subs. That'd be dope. Anyways, we kick off today's story with the tales of monstrous man-eating anacondas recounted by tribespeople of the Amazon basin for centuries. We didn't listen! Luckily, it only eats men, so apparently the women are safe.
What?
For one reason or another, despite being eaten by these things, they worship them instead of hunting and then gaining like access to over 3 billion calories. Anyways, some can be as long as 40 feet allegedly, and if they can't take you out at first, they'll just regurgitate you and then eat you again. Not an ideal situation. Seems like that would also taste pretty gross, though I've never seen a snake season a mouse prior to eating that. So flying over the ocean, Jennifer Lopez and Ice Cube are in this. Man, I do not remember watching this as a youngling, I guess. Entering the jungle, some guy is screaming on the radio about something as the monkeys are going absolutely goblin mode. While that is happening, the whole building begins to shift. Grabbing the force multiplier, he boards up the door as the floor itself starts giving way. Running outside, climb you fool! He then pops a shot at something before getting as high as he can, and then just sitting there. Realizing he's totally boned, he takes himself out instead of dealing with whatever he was dealing with, which we already know is the giant snake. Jumping over to another building in Brazil, old Jenny from the block gets a knock on the door as Professor Kale walks in. Locating a tribe that they are there to film, Jenny from the block is evidently a director of sorts. Meeting Ice Cube in his heyday, he's more friendly, so water tea or whatever it is. So it's all glad hands and everyone eyeing Jenny from the block, discussing Professor Iceberg Lettuce for a moment. They all then jump on what is basically a houseboat. Is that thing seaworthy? Probably not. But is it river-worthy? No. Filming at Noro? Is that what I wrote? Yeah, it's supposed to be Attenborough, but at Noro, they then head up the river to begin their interview of the tribespeople. Wrapping up filming, Hansel here talks about feeling frisky by the jungle, and the answer is he's like, does anybody else feel this? Yes. Something about the heat and humidity has long, since been known to make people hot and bothered. Our emotions are byproducts of our environment, as much as getting hot actually makes you more agitated at everything. And seeing as it's also October now, cuffing season is upon us, making people also pair off. Pretty standard, lower dopamine levels, higher propensity to want to feel skin-on-skin contact and be warm. So, I mean, we are byproducts of the environment. It is what it is. So as a storm rolls in, well, it is a rainforest after all. They get flagged down by some guy in a boat who appears to have been entangled in the roots. Jumping over to their boat, he is informed that they're heading up the river and they can't take him back as another man comes out and recognizes him, which Atenoro then sees. Stopping later on, he successfully spearfishes, as in they ask where he's from, evidently Paraguay. He was a priest, as he's then accused of being a failed priest. Even if this guy wasn't the villain, you guys are just being absolutely jerks to him. So they ask him what his calling is now, as he says he likes snakes. He's informed they are making a documentary. He says he can show them where the people of the mist actually are, as they have saved his life prior. Now it becomes about dancing in the jungle and smoking, because what else are you going to do except enjoy the heat, I guess? Professor Tomatoes then makes a pass at Jenny from the block, and apparently they missed each other as JFTB Blue steals it before kissing him. I'm assuming this is like an ex-girlfriend situation. Elsewhere, a giant snake then moves through the jungle as Dr. Mambo gets attacked. No! Poor Dr. Mambo. Anyway, so Ice Cube then listens to some Mac 10 as David Attenborough over here turns off his music. First rule of the jungle, it makes you horny. Second rule of the jungle, the heat makes you want to fight. Although, you know what would have been a perfect compromise? Probably a pair of Raycon earbuds. So JFTV then approaches Horror Cleric over here as he suggests their goal is just around the riverbed, like Pocahontas style. Also, never look up what happened to Pocahontas. Anyways, I don't trust it. So we see a giant snake totem in the tree eating a person as Horror Cleric then tells them all about the snakes in the area that are gigantic. Horror Cleric then says he traps snakes for a living, which is why he likes snakes. And then he's like, well, I should know which way we should go based on that, which I'm not really sure those things track. Like, yeah, I mean, rising water levels are supposedly going to make you know based on anyways. So Professor Cabbage then argues with Horror Cleric about which direction they should go due to these higher waters as they go right instead of left, which then, makes him upsetty spaghetti. Unskippable ad split up point, like it just has to be this way. So as they stop for the night, they yell over to Horror Cleric, you better not be over there plotting and staring off into the distance smiling, as Horror Cleric is plotting, staring off into the distance smiling, heading off into the jungle that night like an absolute mad lad. They all listen to the life around them as Hansel isn't paying attention to how his woman is being affected by the jungle heat. You idiot. All sounds then stop as they start getting chased by a boar as Horror Cleric then shows up and takes a pot shot. Professor Swiss Chard then pulls out his force multiplier, but Horror Cleric has saved them, which has ingratiated himself to the group. So I guess nobody's going to be getting lucky tonight as they are all told to stay on the boat. These boats are rocking. Anyways, heading out the next morning, they snag something under the water. Quick question, why was that rope just left on the side of the boat near the engine? That's like day one stuff. So Professor Romaine is super okay with jumping into the water. Like he's like, oh yeah, I'll just jump into the jungle river water. Why not? Look, I get some people have zero survival instincts, but absolutely not. He then talks about the fish that swim up your urethra, which, is that real? As much as we would all like to believe it's real for some reason, I mean, I don't, but apparently others do, which if you go back and watch some of my old videos, actually I did believe it was real, but the fish itself is known as the Kandairu, probably. The fish itself is real. It's this small translucent catfish. It's about 1 to 2 inches long. It typically will attach to the gills of larger fish and is more of an issue for them as like it feeds on blood and is typically attracted to the scent of ammonia. Now, the issue of where this idea comes from is based on one alleged case in 1997 that took place in Brazil. For reference, I have a 1997 LX450 based on the 80 series Land Cruiser body style. Absolutely has nothing to do with any of this to reference her, but hey, 1997 activates my almonds to say something. Anyhow, the evidence is disputed pretty heavily as there's not enough documentation to support it, and the specimen when described evidently didn't match up with the actual physical structuring of the Kandairu. So, what exactly happened? Well, I wouldn't advise looking into that, but bro probably literally just put something up his urethra. I'm just throwing it out there. Very odd and obviously maladaptive. Don't do that, because if it's like 1 to 2 inches in length, like think about it. There's another hole, pretty close, that would probably be a lot easier for that thing to swim up. I'm just throwing that out there, man. Anyway, so jumping in, I like how clear the water allegedly is, because reality, it's a jungle river. No shot that water's gonna be that clear. The water is murky. So JFTB is then stared at by old Horror Cleric over here, which is really awkward to film, as Professor Bok Choy gets his mask messed with, as then they fish him out. Record time on drowning their brother, opening his mouth, it was apparently a wasp. They say it's poisonous, or is it venomous? Like that time on Instagram, I know I called that rattlesnake poisonous. I was thinking more about the rattling sound than if it was venomous or poisonous. Like, oh, what's the difference between the words? Happens to the best of us when ape brain is taking over. Pouring whiskey down his gullet, they then cut into his neck and trach him so that he can breathe. Very, very sterile environment to do that. I guess it beats the alternative, though. Although he's going to be on heavy antibiotics for probably several months after this. Think of the flesh-eating bacteria. Oh, God. So Horror Cleric then says, if they don't get Professor Broccoli to the hospital, he's going to die. Horror Cleric then directs them to the same tributary that he suggested yesterday as JFTB notices, this route looks oddly familiar on the map. So as they float along, they approach a wall across the river. Horror Cleric then just wants to blow it up, and approaching the wall with exploding intent, they place the dynamite as Hansel says there's something down in the water. Yes, it's a jungle. Why would you be getting it? Okay, I'm just saying, dude, like, there's gotta be like a dinghy or something y'all could have taken. Why do you keep getting into the water? So heading back to the party boat, they light the charges as they lose all their fuel tanks as snakes are sent flying everywhere. They arguably could have backed way further, and I'm just saying, yes, I know it's a movie. Horror Cleric then starts throwing them off the boat, the snakes that is, as Atenoro doesn't know how to pull a snake off his hand. Okay, also, I'm just gonna point this, I think the fuel barrels would technically float, right? At least I think they would. So Water Tea then goes and checks on JFTB and Professor Scallions as she has concerns of where Horror Cleric is taking them. What, that guy? The guy who's plotting? Smiling off into the distance at night with a trustworthy face, he's fine. Horror Cleric then tells them to stop the boat as they see another boat on the side that appears to be completely abandoned. Entering the water again like absolute psychos, they begin making their way downtown, wading slow to a boat that they don't know and they're snake food bound. Water T then decides to stay in the water and film for some god-awful reason, before remembering he's in jungle water and crawls out. Look, if you're not picking this up, I don't like murky water at all. It is not something I'm about. Like, it activates my almonds, rustles my jimmies, it does a lot of things. Maybe that's also why I hate the anglerfish so much, because it's down there in the dark and I can't see it, and I'm like, ugh! It's just, I hate obscure water. I can't stand it. So anyways, getting on the boat, it's all broken force multipliers and Horror Cleric clearly knowing where to go. Finding a chest, he evidently stumbled upon treasures, as he calls it. Okay. So taking the chest with them, they begin walking back as Horror Cleric then yells at the boat captain to go. Slipping and falling into the water, he immediately is anacondaed as he's suffocated and eaten. Water T then goes back on his own to check on him as he finds his flashlight, but not him. JFTB then calls out to Water T as he reports the captain is missing. Horror Cleric now shows the snake skin that he's had the whole time. It's massive, and that was 3 or 4 years ago, and it's bigger now. There's probably a joke I could make there. Anyways, Horror Cleric then says he didn't eat the party boat captain, as Atenoro then says they need to go and get out of there, because, I mean, yes, and I agree, get out of there. Turning on the lights and just sitting there for the night, Hansel and Denise then talk about going to bed. I couldn't think of any name for Denise. She just gets to be Denise. Anyways, jungle time on the boat. Horror Cleric then says something about danger as Hansel then goes to talk to him. Horror Cleric proclaims he needs a partner to capture the snake alive, and they should at least make $1 million, which, I mean, I know $1 million even sounds like a lot right now. It's really not. Like, God, like, back when International Man of Mystery was around, 1 million wasn't really that good then. It's even worse now. Anyway, so our Monopoly money aside, getting the reptile tranquilizer ready, Horror Cleric then stares at JFTB, sleeping in a really uncomfortable chair. Atenoro is booze cruising it at this point as JFTB goes and checks on Professor Beats. Horror Cleric then snipes a monkey from a tree to use as bait as JFTB says, not on my boat, but like capturing the giant snake. Hansel then says, why don't we just film this? We could, Horror Cleric could capture the large snake, it'll be good. Also, JFTB really, is she in charge of the boat? I know there has to be like some sort of hierarchy here, but who is it? Anyways, Hansel gives them a pep talk on how they should do this as Water T says he will throw both of them in the river. You guys have already been in there like 20 times, who cares? So it now becomes a hostage situation for the most part, but it's like a really low energy hostage situation. Like all you would have to do is be like, you know what, screw it, let's capture the snake. And then it goes back to just a regular situation. Objectively, I mean, it's just capturing a snake. So as Horror Cleric then fishes that night, he catches something as he starts trying to reel it in. Pulling up a giant anaconda. See, this is why, again, I don't go to murky water. Blinding the anaconda with a spotlight, this thing is totally lost in the sauce as Water T then drops his knife. In the chaos, the snake is lost as it then squares up and throws up the monkey at David Attenborough. Then going to JFTB, Horror Cleric then hits it with a trank as Denise is then knocked into the water. Hansel then goes in and gets wrapped up as JFTB is prevented from taking it out as well. So there goes Hansel. So not hot right now. Having a nice cry the next day and also at the edge of the water, which absolutely no way. Denise then squares up with Horror Cleric as he says there's a devil inside everyone. See? Horror Cleric. Water T wants to square up, but without the knife, not much can be done, It's not like you couldn't just grab a stick and hit him in the head or something, or, I don't know, wrestle the rifle away from him, or knee him or something. I don't know, dude. So we also get to see the hilarious CGI Hansel in a snake stomach. Also, probably should clarify it's not the next day, it's still the same night. Heading upstairs to drive the boat, JFTV then puts on lipstick for some reason, and I break away just to say the meter is still running across the planet, so good luck with that. Oh, and she goes upstairs, she's like, oh, I'm gonna make a move on Horror Cleric. Yes, I see, he's thinking with his small brain sort of deal. She then talks about how this film was supposed to be her big break. Touching the steering wheel, she makes a pass at him. But, here's the thing, right? The acting is not obvious because it's supposed to be like obvious like in the movie itself, like, oh, well, she's not used to acting because she's the director. This is actually just the range of acting with Jennifer Lopez. God. Anyways, well, Water T then rolls up as David Attenborough then knocks him out with a wedge as they tie him up. Affixing him to the pole of the boat, JFTB then confronts him about it being all one big setup. He says they can't survive without him as Denise is not vibing with this universe any longer. Professor AG1 is still over there, just completely knocked out, as British Man has now been tasked with driving this thing. Handing it off to Water T, everyone is ready to just go home. Passing more carvings, they see some waterfalls where the anacondas grow. Running aground, they get stuck. Nice. Gets you hoofing it from here. And realizing that to winch themselves out, they gotta head back into the water to do this. Oof! Imagine saying oof in 2025. Horror Cleric is still observing menacingly as Denise then approaches him with a knife. Denise, I don't know if you got it in you, gal. I'm just gonna go ahead and, this is just grief. So he ends up choking her out in record time somehow, as then he just sort of rolls her off the boat and nobody heard any of this. Getting the knife, he goes to cut himself loose as the shag carpet in the water starts moving. The Anaconda has now found them once more. Atenoro then squares up with it as they tell him to climb the rocks to get away from it. As he does, somehow Horror Cleric starts taking over once again, like dude is just 2v1 soloing. Meanwhile, Anaconda straight up T-Rexes in the waterfall as it grabs David Attenborough as he jumps. The tree then falls on the boat, mega stucking it. There has to be a better word for that. As Professor Collard Greens finally wakes back up. I mean, I guess we shouldn't have trusted Horror Cleric, that it was so pressing that he was going to be dying, and yeah. He may have lied about that. So Water T is tangled up in a bunch of weeds as Denise then shows back up to Water T, getting wrapped. JFTB then domes the Anaconda as it lets Water T loose, with Horror Cleric getting tranked by Professor Arugula. But the dart came out of his back, so he didn't get fully tranked. I don't know how long it takes for tranquilizers to actually work in this capacity, but I'm pretty sure it's almost like a near immediate kind of injection, right? So taking him back to his room, given he's been out for several days, he was pretty good at figuring out the situation on site, somehow freeing themselves and then moved to where the original guy at the beginning got eaten. Classic. Full circle. Heading out into the building, they are still being stalked by another. Also classic. It's like Jaws and way bigger Jaws. Heading inside, they surmise that the drums could be fuel, or something else entirely, and then finding snakeskin inside, Horror Cleric has made the scene. Getting knocked out, that can literally cave in your face. Don't hit people with the butt of a force multiplier. Also, if you are knocked out for several hours, you have brain damage, right? Getting knocked out should almost be like your brain comes back online within just a few seconds. If you're out for like 30 minutes and you wake up, yeah, you messed up. So pouring monkey blood on them because reasons, he then plays in human bones turned to ashes as he heads upstairs. Looking up, way bigger Anaconda has made the scene. Horror Cleric then watches as they are both wrapped up as he traps all three of them in a net, tying them off to a pipe. He then goes to trank it, I guess only trying to hit the head for some reason. Don't know why. I mean, it has the rest of its body there, and I'm fairly certain snakes have a circulatory system, don't they? So running away, he gets bitten and grabbed as eventually he gets wrapped up, breaking his jaw. Ouchies. Consuming him whole, Water T then gets smacked as JFTB climbs. Finding a bunch of little snakes, it's a snake nursery. Spitting up Horror Cleric, it appears as though he's somewhat alive, though I don't think it could have just been, There's no way he didn't suffocate in there, right? That was too long of a time. So continuing the cat and mouse chase, or giant snake and human chase, Water T pickaxes its tail, trapping it, as JFTB then climbs but can't escape. Emerging, it's a pretty far jump as the chimney then explodes and JFTB is thrown in. The snake emerges out of the water in a similar fashion to when you bareback a $5 hooker. What is that, Rash? The key is to never trust a truck stop waitress. That is common sense. So, who knows? Good luck to you, though. Going after Jenny still, I really don't know why this thing is absolutely obsessed with her. Like, it's an animal on fire. You'd think it would just straight up be swimming away because it's on fire. But descending into the water, Water T then goes to get the fuel as the snake emerges once more and he axes it in the head, taking it out finally. Of course, this is the second one, so clearly there are probably more, right? Checking on Professor Turnip Greens, he then tells her she's a mess. Yeah, well, good morning to you too, brother. Usually women love being told that. Hugging it out, I guess he's just good to go as finally they find the people of the mist. But they lost David Attenborough, so I guess they just get the camera and film them. But what use is it now? So, exiting the area, thus concludes Anaconda. And to the science portion we go. Now, I think the most clear place we should start would have to be what even is the feasibility of this, as well as where did this creature possibly come from in the first place? Because oversized burning snakes are typically not the norm on this planet for several reasons. Well, oversized anyhow. Burning snakes? Really just mostly predicated on your life choices, typically. So as we take a look at this species, we can surmise several things based on its measurements and method of attacking, but along with that, we have to ask a fairly important question. Could this be possible today? The answer is yeah, probably. Actually, given where we were headed with this, it's alarmingly possible. But let's start with the facts of anacondas first. It's important to remember that this is not just a length issue, but a girth one. Lord, phrasing. The anaconda species is currently residing, or at least it resides, within South America, and they're quite large as one might imagine. The reality is, if you tango with one, you will legitimately be entangled and then crushed to death. These creatures operate really annoyingly if you think about it. Upon wrapping you up, they don't just squeeze the life out of you immediately and break your jaw. They will wait for you to breathe out. And then, when they do, or when you do, they will wrap a little tighter, so each time it becomes more and more difficult to breathe in properly. Now, if another human is with you, they can usually untangle you with a fair amount of effort, but if you are on your own, you better hope you got an arm free and a machete in hand, because you need to go for the head. Even then, the muscle of its body can still work to constrict for a little while longer until the creature finally bleeds out. Anyhow, eventually your lungs will not have enough room to expand as your thoracic cavity is collapsed, and you will suffocate as a result. Much like many other snakes of the animal kingdom, the anaconda is no different. It can then unhinge its jaw and swallow prey whole, much like your mom. As it does this, the entire body will be broken down for caloric nutrition. Now, the thing about the snakes of South America is that we all know kind of horrifically they can grow up to 20 feet long, or at least 28 feet long, which is the longest one that has ever been measured. That is a highly successful hunter by all metrics, given it has been alive for that long and has been able to be successful for that long at hunting. Although, truth be told, they do not need to be masterful hunters, so to speak, because in general, there are just less constraints on them, unlike warm-blooded animals, which is also why it's bizarre how much these creatures are eating, at least in the Anaconda movie. Although, at a certain point to me, this is really more just, it seems like a territorial issue, because there is no shot this thing isn't just being gluttonous and a giant pig at this point. Now, given that standard anacondas can reach up to 28 feet, but they usually reside around 20 feet, the anacondas in the movie, and probably Anaconda 2 Snake Boogaloo, actually get to around 40 feet, believe it or not. So, according to the longest one we found, they're only 30% larger, which, I mean, sort of hilarious. I mean, that just means one of these things could totally be out there now. It is possible. We just haven't found it. The real delineating factor is maybe they're more difficult to kind of come into contact with, given that the jungle is fairly dense down there, and, which phrasing there too, but good lord. Anyways, this is exactly why I stay out of those jungles, because I don't want to meet one of these things. But that, and part of the reason, is because I have an absolute hatred for flying. Take that up with my amygdala. I have no idea what the deal is with that, but let's just assume the anterior cingulate cortex is definitely not putting in the work like it needs to. Neither here nor there. So functionally, could this happen in real life? Well, yes, at least concerning its size and location. Now, the issue that comes into play is simply the behavior of this thing. It is acting well outside of the standard hunting patterns of an anaconda. So for that, we need to sort of talk about the elephant in the room. I do not believe this specifically to just be a standard version of an anaconda. Instead, I think it's like a bit of a leftover relic. Now, here's the problem I have. This creature could actually exist on the planet right now, but the biggest problem that would have to come to mind is the actual ability this creature appears to have and its overall circumference. While anacondas can get rather large, they most certainly wouldn't be this beefy, even given the 30% larger status from the movie. They typically have a body plan that would put them at a maximum size and at a certain point with caloric restrictions placed on its body, and that's usually, like, the thickest ones are only going to be having a diameter of about a foot. Also, I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. The science section may as well just be a lesson in zoology mixed with paleontology, because it's about giant snakes. So if that's not your thing, well, just don't be a nerd, watch anyways. Anyhow, there is one creature we can point to concerning what we were seeing in this area that appears possibly to match up with the anaconda of this movie, especially its propensity to kind of rear up and, like, strike. You know it, I know it. Let's take a trip back to 62 million years ago, roughly about 3 million years when the dinosaurs went extinct, or at least after, when the dinosaurs went extinct. It was a point that the land had largely healed, the atmosphere settled, and life was already in the middle of a Will Smith bounce back, which... So far, that's been the culmination of all life continuing on. Oh god. So there lived a creature within South America around this time known as titanoboa. This thing was a freaking nightmare. Like, legitimately, I usually don't care about snakes all that much. I mean, it's no wretched abomination like the anglerfish, which needs to be eradicated from this planet. And if we try real hard and focus all of humanity's efforts, I project we can be rid of this plague by 2026. Also, for everyone who keeps tagging me of the small anglerfish post on Twitter, bro, that was a male. The females are much larger, and that's where we need to focus our collective efforts. Take them all out. Anyhow, titanoboa was an absolute beast of a snake. Almost, again, a relic from a bygone era, even when it was around, from when dinosaurs existed. It pretty much began its winter arc, or getting massive, for that reason. It was contending with other species that were much larger and inhabiting the same area. Now, you may be inclined to believe that it was because, well, maybe there was more oxygen levels at the time, or maybe it was just bulking, something along those lines, but nope. Not this time. Instead, these creatures literally existed because of the evolutionary arms race that has taken place forever. The prey they were hunting were massive, so in an effort to contend with that and not become dinner, themselves, they would ultimately begin to grow larger as well. So the biggest ones survived wasn't really oxygen. Titanoboa was not just a massive snake in terms of length, which almost lines up perfectly here, measuring to about 42 to 45 feet in freedom units, or 12.8 to 13.7 meters in heathen units. And to make it even more unpatriotic, the average baguette is around 65 centimeters, so like 21.1 baguettes. I feel like I need to go take a shower. Anyhow, the cross-section of its body was about 3.3 feet at its thickest, which again, Anaconda, I mean, they only have about a foot, so it's at least 3.3 times, I guess, bigger in diameter, which, I mean, basically is about 1-ish meters or so. So this creature was absolutely massive, but honestly, it's not much larger than the snakes that are already out there in the jungles nowadays. Now, why did they allegedly go extinct? And by that, I mean lengthwise. Girth-wise, these dudes were friggin' huge. So it really was as simple as the changing of the climate as it is with all things. It was around this time that Earth was actually entering a cooling period and things began to, as you might expect, cool down. But that wasn't the only problem that would arise. The prey situation was shifting and other species were arising as well. With the dinosaurs gone and larger animals having difficulty in the post-asteroid world to a degree, seeing as the larger ones were wiped out and the age of dinosaurs was over and the age of mammals began, USA baby, the titanoboa was just a leftover relic from that time. They would still feast on crocodiles and the larger animals that could be there, but eventually they started getting out-competed. It was around this time smaller snake variants began to pop up in a way that was direct competition, and by smaller, they were still very much larger. I mean, think of Anaconda today, but they were more agile, could strike quicker, and their presence was less noticed by prey. As a result, the animals that Titanoboa would normally go after would become more scarce. Now what's interesting is, even though this animal could be around 1.25 tons, the reality is, because it was an ectotherm, its metabolism was not all that demanding. This creature would only need about 6,500 calories a day, as its body was not producing the heat it needed to survive. So let me do some quick math real quick. So I weigh 172 pounds right now. I need, allegedly, with my BMR, I think it's like 2,800 calories basically, because I am, in fact, warm-blooded. If we take 1.25 tons, not pounds, 1.25 tons, that would give us about 2,500 pounds, which if we take my weight, take its weight, divided by 172, that gives us 14.53. By comparison, if you want to know the difference between a cold-blooded animal and a warm-blooded animal, for me to exist at that size and survive, I would need 40,697 calories a day, which is wild. And imagine if I only ate meat. So with a titanoboa needing 6,500 calories, that's about 7 pounds of meat. Actually, to be more clear, that's 7.7 pounds. So by comparison, I would need to eat 48.2 pounds of meat per day. Like I said, this thing was absolutely bulking. What a chat. But even just needing 7 pounds of meat, therein lies the issue. As it ate larger animals, those take longer to grow. Those would also become less plentiful over time anyhow due to the shifting atmosphere, which then left it with just smaller prey. Needing 7 pounds of meat a day doesn't sound bad, but when those smaller animals are the perfect prey target for smaller snakes, it left Titanoboa starving most of the time unless it kept constantly moving to new areas, which in turn would put it in direct competition with other Titanoboas, also having the same exact problem. But did it actually go extinct? The reality is the killer of Titanoboa was just a combination of a few things. Again, the food issue, but also the actual temperature began dropping across the planet due to just an impending cooling era, I guess you could say. So while the jungles of this time were still very warm, at least by warm-blooded animals' metrics, the reality is to a cold-blooded animal, this would start slowing them down considerably. Given the creature was already massive in the first place, this would put even more constraints on it continuing to cause problems, and eventually it did get cold. Not terribly cold, but it wasn't like a snowball Earth issue, but it was in general just a gradual cooling, and this would ultimately end these creatures as it would slow them down because their movement is directly impendent upon like the heat around them. Is it impendent? Dependent. What the hell is impendent? Anyways, it's dependent on the heat around them and the heat that they can absorb so they can reach essentially an operating temperature. Think of like ectotherms as a diesel engine versus endotherms as like a gas engine, right? When you try to start a diesel engine, it is cold and it doesn't like to start. It's the same with ectotherms. But anyways, they would essentially be outcompeted by smaller, more agile variants of snakes as prey also began to get smaller as well. No big blowout, no fireworks, just a species from a bygone era. Now, could it have survived into the modern day? Titanoboa's reign on Earth, the gradual cooling of the planet, could in theory have caused them to also just downsize. They were around long enough for changes to begin taking place because remember, life is just random chance. Maybe in a clutch of eggs, one snake was just a little bit smaller than the rest, and because of this, it was able to compete with the smaller snakes and survive. As it passed on its genes with potentially another small titanoboa of its same species, it would then get smaller and smaller until eventually they would probably be on like the larger side of the smaller snakes. But they were able to compete as the largest of the titanoboa died off. So this would cause the bloodline in this particular area to still be able to thrive, but they would never really have been what they once were. Then one day, the planet started warming again. For the last 10,000 years, Earth has been warming. As this species in general was larger, it would then hunt a particular area for the most part that was completely unknown by modern society, but was known to the tribespeople deep within the depths of the jungle. For one reason or another, the food here was enough to keep them alive. Maybe the waterfalls aerated the water enough of the river that would cause larger fish to be able to grow here, as the snakes would then reside within this area, staying alive. Then, as Earth began to warm over the last 10,000 years, they continued to grow as well. So now, 10,000 years, I mean, it's not a crazy amount of time for adaptation to take place, but it's also not enough time. By this point, let's say a long-lost relative of Titanoboa had decreased to around 30 feet or so. With an explosion of life and temperature happening, they would then once again begin eating more and having access to all the things that led to their original growth. Except for, Tyrannosaurus Rex or that one crocodile that could gallop. Terrifying. So because of this, they can now hunt the area once more, similar to what they were, although not an exact same build as before. Ultimately, this species to me is definitely hailing from the lineage of Titanoboa. Not only do they constrict and are much longer, but their ability to rear up and rise to incredible heights is largely owed to the skeletal structuring of Titanoboa and what it had as well. So this allows for this creature to follow prey high up into waterfalls without having to support itself on a rock or do anything else. They can just rear up. It's sort of like a cobra almost. And along with this, their sheer size, while not that much larger than an anaconda, still indicates to me that this species definitely hails from something besides just anacondas. But well, I hope you enjoyed that dive into an extinct species because I believe I'm going to wrap that up there. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like as it helps get the video out there. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date when I post. I know this one was just kind of interesting to me. I remember watching Anaconda as a kid, and I was like, dude, this is crazy. So I'm glad I finally got to cover that. But anyways, I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales channel link where that's sort of taken off, so you should go check that out. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I want to thank our astronauts Kusith and Saucy Dub Socks. Thank you guys for your awesome support. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Magura. Thank you guys as well. And next up, I'd like to thank our scientists, Stutz, Frank Shaftcrank. I actually love electric cars and the Anglerfish, Metric System, Invictus Echo, and Official Texan. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It was a long way towards helping out, so thank you. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed. I'll see y'all in the next one.